Hello and welcome to Blender 101, Session 5, or Week 5, where we're going to take a look at particle systems inside of Blender. So, before we get going, there are a few announcements I wanted to throw out there. First off, I'm going to get a browser. Browsers are good. Let me get a browser. Dun, 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 dun. Hello, browser. I wanted to point out for everybody who is watching this class that we have just recently launched the C++ live class registration. So actually, from the front page of 3D Buzz, if you need like a quick way to get to it, you can click here. And then there's this great big obnoxious green thing down here, and it says, those interested in this awesome C++ 101 and Introduction live webinar class, use the following links. Now, if you're watching this video, I think it's pretty safe to assume that you're already a member sponsor. So you would click on the member sponsor link, which takes you to the member sponsor lounge with all of the various registration. This is going to be an amazing class. It's 8 weeks long instead of just 6. We're still going to be having 2 sessions of the class each week. So there will be Monday sessions and Friday sessions with different times to try to accommodate as many people as we possibly can. We understand that not everybody can work on a single time frame, and I mean, I get emails all the time with this Blender class, hey, can you have it any other day but Saturday and at any other time than noon, and can you have it at my house, and can you bring beer and sandwiches? And usually I'm like, well, the beer and sandwiches sounds cool, but I really can't do anything else at the moment. I did want to point this out, though. If you're interested in taking the C++ class, that the very first session of it is free. Now, because of the way Citrix has set up their webinar system, we have to have 2 entirely separate registrations. So, like, one registration is specifically for the first week, because that's free and open to the public. And then the other registration is for the remaining weeks that are exclusive to member sponsors. So if you're a member sponsor and you want to watch the entire thing and take part in the entire class, you're going to need to register for both of these. So, like, if you want to join in on Mondays, you want to join here, and you want to join here. If you want to do Fridays, of course, you want to do these 2 links. There's nothing stopping you from signing up for all of them. So if you want to attend on Fridays and you want to attend on Mondays, you can definitely do that. That's totally cool. I do also want to point out, in case anybody misses the bright red, obnoxious little listing in the middle of the schedule, that on May the 21st and the 25th, there will be no class because we will be out of town. So everybody knows. But definitely, if you're interested in programming with C++, take a quick look over the schedule and consider joining. I hope to see you guys there. So also, in other news, in other announcements, I have a fairly rudimentary syllabus set up for Blender 102. Blender 102 will be starting very shortly, like within a matter of days, after Blender 101 wraps. And it's going to be completely geared toward modeling. Now, I want to mention this so that everybody hears me. By the time that class starts, it's entirely possible that Blender 2.6 will not be out, meaning that B-Mesh will not be, I gotta use finger quotes, will not be officially implemented. But B-Mesh is actually working really well in the beta, a few very minor insignificant snags aside. So what we're going to do for the 102 class is we are going to just use the beta that includes B-Mesh. And if there are any extra little, if we find any features that cause Blender to rapidly shut down, we're just going to remember to save a little more often and not stress too much about it. But I've been using the B-Mesh build for a while now, and it's really nice. And yeah, it is due out in April, but yeah, sometimes it happens. Sometimes it takes them an extra week or 2. And if it's not out at the time that we begin the class, that's okay. It's not really the end of our world. So I just want to announce that we will be doing a character throughout the class, and the last X number of weeks of the class. So it's not going to be a 6-week class, by the way. It's going to be at least 7, possibly more. I'll get, like I said, I'm still kind of ironing out the syllabus. But the last week, or possibly weeks plural, are actually going to be modeling on the fly style sessions, where I'm going to take a subject, something we have to model, and I'm just going to attack it live on camera and make it up as I go. And then if you guys have any questions while I'm working, you can ask and be like, hey, why did you do this? Or why would you do this? Or why do you suck at modeling, Zach? And I'll be like, well, I drank too much beer when I was modeling. And So yeah, those are my big announcements. We have a UDK class coming up very soon. I'm also in the midst of polishing up the last little bits of the syllabus for that. I do want to mention this, though. Right now, I'm looking at the probability, not just possibility, but the probability of not doing Unreal Script for this first class. I know, there's like an audible, oh, but there's a good reason behind it. What I'd like to do is turn this upcoming UDK class into kind of a special topics class. Look at some specific things like, take a session and look entirely at lighting and all little things you need to know about lighting. And then another one over things like particles or materials, or and just have these specialized classes where we look at that sort of thing. And then save Unreal Script for its very own class. So have a multi-week class that is just about typing out Unreal Script. Because I think doing it any other way would just, I don't know, it'd be shortchanging you guys. You need time to work with Unreal Script. You need practice. There's a lot of things to talk about. And if I tried to take Unreal Script and just cram it into 1 or 2 sessions, you'd get a headache. I'd get frustrated. I mean, it'd be a mess for everybody, so we don't need to do that. So that's what I'm looking at right now. Now, official announcements about all of that will be forthcoming. So, I mean, bug me if you want to, but I'm just going to probably respond back by telling you not to bug me because we've got all that stuff in the works, and I'm still sanding out the corners, etc., and so forth. Now, I just got a question that rolled in on the webinar system from Robert Preston. Said, I just tried to register for the open version of the C++ class, and it gave me a complaint, saying I'd already registered for one at that time. The member sponsorship webinar, I assume. Will this be a problem? It shouldn't be a problem, and it shouldn't overlap, but hang on, let me write that down. Here's the note I'm actually writing. Robert Preston, which I believe that, aren't you Iron Soul? Give me a yes or no. No? Well then, who's Robert Preston? I can't keep track of all the screen names and real names, and it's just so much fun. Robert Preston fails at life. So that's what I've now written down. And that will remind me to go talk to Jason and tell him that you are having funny little issues about stuff. And then Chris Morris said, you should pump my UDK challenge thread, because we all know that's what NATO sounds like. Well, you know what? Let me do that real quick. Let's see. If I can hit Control F and find challenge right here on the front page. I can't. So I guess I got to go to the next page. Thanks a lot. Is it in the Unreal forums or the lounge? I can't keep up. Hopefully it's... Oh, you know what? It's a UDK. It's an Unreal-based thread, and you put it in the lounge. Way to go, buddy. Way to go. So this is NATO's UDK challenge thread. And I just wanted to point this out to everybody. It's in the lounge for some inexplicable reason, but just so you guys all know where it is. And you can see what, I'm not actually going to read it to you guys, but he's got this great challenge that he's put out to everybody who watched the 5-hour introduction class to see if you actually learned anything, which was really cool. And I grinned pretty big when I saw that. So let's see, there's that. I think that's all the real critical announcements that I have, folks. I do want to throw this out because you guys are all member sponsors. One, we really love and appreciate you guys. Really, your support means everything, and we hope that this stuff that we have to offer, these live classes, any videos and everything, we hope that's keeping you guys happy. But I did kind of want to ask something of you, if you can, and if you can't, I understand. We do a lot of announcements in the Member Sponsor Lounge, and in several cases, those announcements are also reflected in the public lounge. Of course, we do that so that non-member sponsors can also see them and perhaps get excited about what we have to offer. When you can, I was wondering if you guys would be kind enough to give your responses in the heart of your enthusiasm over in the public forums. It helps people see the excitement. It really helps folks who are new to 3D Buzz see that there's a lot of people who are really interested in what we do, and it helps them get excited, which in turn can help them sign up. And that's a huge thing for us because really member sponsors are pretty much the only way we support ourselves these days. DVD sales are really not what they used to be. People aren't buying them. We're really kind of switching over to this member sponsor specific model, and anything you guys can do is highly appreciated in just helping us get the word out, helping us generate excitement, and helping kind of boost that visibility for what we have to offer. So I wanted to throw that out there. I mean, just if you can, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's get this closed. Today we're going to be taking a look at particles inside of Blender. Now, I'm going to give you guys a warning. A couple of warnings, actually. It's entirely possible this class will not be the big, lumbering, lengthy behemoth that some of our other classes have been. And if we get out a little bit early today, or if we had done a little bit early, then that's going to be cool. I'll hang out for the duration of our time in case there are any questions or anything. I don't know. This could be quick. This could take a little while. We'll just have to see. Also, you should know that particles in general, just as a topic, are something you could teach an entire class over. Teaching how to do various effects, teaching how to do various aspects of particle behavior. There are so many things that you can keep track of and have to know, and it's deep. So today, what we're going to be doing is focusing on creating a couple of very specific effects using particles. Now, to show those off, let's see. If I close all this stuff, there's my screen without any sort of icons on it, which is good. I really don't necessarily want you guys to see all of the icons on my desktop. You guys don't need to know how many video games I actually play. But if I come over here, and you guys will bear with me for just a second.
It's a very nice blue.
You know, it kind of is, but you know what? We don't really need that, so I'll go ahead and bring Blender back up. And while I'm doing that, I just want to look something up real quick. If I remembered how to navigate Windows 7, I'd probably be dangerous. And I haven't tried Windows 8 yet, but it does look exciting, doesn't it? Ah, yes, here's what I was looking for. The whole time, this is what I wanted. Dun, 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 dun. And this is probably murdering frame rate, so let me make that really small. So what we're going to be doing today is this nice, soft, fuzzy grass that you see all along our hill. And if you watch really closely, as we bound up to the top of the hill, and we take our swing, here we go, draw back, and crack. We're going to do this, too. This little bit where it looks like he kind of whiffed the top of the grass and chops them off, and you see it kind of fly through the air, like so. So those are the two things we're going to be handling today, primarily. Now, these are relatively easy effects, but there are a lot of settings to getting them to look just right. So to make your lives easier, I have created a stack of notes for you to use. You can find these over in the Member Sponsor Lounge. And apparently I have a PM from Ilera, who is now famous for doing that. And if you look under Blender 101, Week 5, Grass Particles Notes, there is a shared Google document that you can snag that has everything that I'm doing today. It should be pretty accurate, but it's entirely possible. I am human, and these are just notes. There's something to just kind of get me started. It's possible I mistyped something, or there could be a weird value. So if you're going to use these notes, that's great. But if I were you, I would have a pen handy in case you need to make annotations or minor changes, or doodle, draw unicorns in the corners, whatever you need to do. All right. So back over here, let's go ahead and get started. Some things you need to know about particles in Blender. If you are coming to Blender from other 3D applications, you might be used to the concept of particles kind of being this sort of standalone creature. Like you can, like in Maya. I'm a big Maya person, so we'll just use that as an example. In Maya, you can create an emitter, a particle emitter. It is its own object, and its only job, its only reason for living, is to spit particles into your scene. In Blender, things are a little bit different. In Blender, you create particles as kind of an addition to an existing object. So you will take something, like in this case, our hill, and you will say, I want this to have a particle system attached to it. You do that over here in the Properties panel underneath Particles. Now, if you're looking for kind of an introduction to this area, I do want to point something out to you that will make your life a little easier. If we go to the Blender Fundamentals videos, which you can get off the front page, there's all kinds of different ways to find them. If I hit Control F and just start typing particles, here is a rundown of the properties window for the particle system. The video is not even all that long. So definitely keep that in mind if you just need kind of a rundown of all the bits and pieces of this area. Somebody just asked, can we take a 30-second break? Just take one. And just go. We'll still be here when you get back, I promise. We won't be done in 30 seconds. Okay, so again, today our big thing is creating this grass. So what I'm going to do for starters is I'm going to start creating this kind of one step at a time. And after every couple of steps, I will pause for folks to catch up. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. But understand, kind of based on the announcement, that I'm not turning this into the definitive class over particles. I want to show you these effects that we're creating and give you some information. So if you want to play with it and kind of take this to the next level on your own, you should have more than enough information to do that. Now, just to be nice, what I'm going to do before we actually start clicking things and creating stuff, I'm going to pause the video, and we're going to take a quick 2-minute break to make a couple of people happy, and then when we come back, we're just going to start on the creation process. Okay, so we are back, and it is time for us to start creating the particle effect for our grass. So this is actually a pretty easy thing to do, but again, there are a lot of settings. If you get lost, please refer to the notes that I have put up. They should get you at least most of the way to where we need to go. So for starters, we're just going to click on the plus sign to create a brand new particle system. Now the great thing about doing this is as soon as you've created your particle system, you automatically get a whole bunch of particles all over the place. And you can, there's nothing stopping you from just hitting play. And it's like you've created a rainstorm under the earth, which is pretty nifty, but these aren't the kind of particles we want to use right now. We are more interested in creating grass, or what we're going to reappropriate the hair system. So if you look under type, take your emitter and set it over to hair. And you get the best grass ever. Like immediately, with one click, you're done. Let's go home, right? Actually, for those of you who are curious, this is what happens when you render this. I mean, tell me that's not exciting, right? All right, so we've got some hair. It's stuck to our surface, but obviously there's some things we want to change. So the first thing I want to change is going to be under your emission settings. We're going to change the amount or the number of emitted particles, basically the number of hair strands, all the way up to 5,000. And you see that makes a whole lot of hair. And so we get something that looks kind of like this. Now, I know we're kind of plugging our way through this, and I want to make sure people who want to follow along are able to follow along. So what I want to do is let's just go ahead and start getting the hands involved right now. Go ahead and put your hand up just for starter. Everybody put your hand up. Over in the webinar system, everybody put your hand up. I want to see them all. Every single hand. Unless you're just not following along at all. And then I'm going to sort by hands to see who's up and who's not. And those of you who are not, I'm totally writing your name down, and I'm not even going to tell you what I'm going to do. It's going to be pretty bad, though. All right, and then once you get this, I want you to put your hand back down. So once you get, all right, and I'm watching the hands disappear. Great, practice that. Get used to that, because that's what we're going to be doing as we move forward. Okay, so you've got some grass. It's ridiculously tall. It doesn't even look like grass, but it is here, and it's a good start. Next, we need to change some things about it, obviously. So check the advanced button, or the little advanced checkbox directly underneath hair. That's going to give us some additional things that we can set. So not only do we change our number to 5,000, but now we have the ability to make sure that random and even distribution are both on. And then take your jittered value, because basically this is how this is being placed across the surface. Change it from jittered to random. It's going to be a subtle change in placement, but it will make things a little easier for us. It'll look a little better. Now, the next piece of stuff we're going to change is down underneath velocity. Now, velocity is going to control the direction that this grass is starting to grow. So the first thing I want you to point out to you is the normal value. This is, and if you're taking notes or if you're looking at the notes, this is the length of your grass or the length of your hair. So just play with this real quick, and you adjust the slider, and you can have your grass get really tall, and you can have it get really short. I want to point this out to you specifically because some of you have animated your bouncing characters. Notice I didn't choose the obvious word because it would have been horrible. That maybe you're a little bit far off the surface of your hill, or maybe you're really close to it, or maybe you just got some various heights that you need to change around a little bit. Well, you can use the height of the grass to kind of cover that up. So while I have a value in there, and I think I've told you guys in the notes, set this to like, what, 0.06? And even that may not actually work well in the end, but we'll go ahead and leave it there for now. Just remember, you can come back to this at any given point later on and be like, you know what, I need the grass to be taller, or I need it to be shorter. So don't be afraid to do that. Next, we're going to take the random value, which is, and this is just going to give the grass a little bit of a random spread. We're going to set this to 0.01. This just keeps the grass from being perfectly uniform and sticking up perfectly straight from all angles. So if we hit F12 and we give a render to this, here's what we got right now. And already, I mean, it looks like funny little, like, almost like pine needles sticking up out of snow, which occasionally you will find, like underneath trees, pine needles will fall and do that. But you can see they've already got a little bit of random direction to them. You don't want too much. If you take this value and crank it, notice how things start to get really crazy really quick. So 0.01 is more than enough. And just in case anybody was curious, if you just leave this at 0, things are just a little too uniform. It's just like perfect needles stuck in at exactly, perpendicular to the surface. Now, I also want to mention this, kind of like just a general statement. All of these values that I mention here today, all of the values in the notes, are specific to this lesson and my scene and what I've got going on. So if you have anything different in your scene, don't be afraid to play with these values. Don't be afraid to look through at values I don't even touch and mess around with them and get something that looks better for your particular shot. So how does changing the normal parameter to change the grass height differ from using the main length setting? It doesn't really. It's in here. It's just the first way that we're going to use to control it because it's just going straight down the list. I want to talk about length a little bit later, and you'll see how we're going to handle that. All right, now moving down from here, we have under our render settings. So we're done with our velocity. And then we're going to go down to render. Now, we have to remember that this particle system is a part of an existing object. It's not just a free-floating particle system in and of itself. It is slaved to this hill object. We can control which material that is assigned to our object is going to be assigned specifically to the particles, and that's through this material value here. We're going to set this to 2. Why are we going to do this? Because later on we're going to add some materials to the hill, and our first material will be the material for the ground. The second material will be the one we'll actually use for the grass. So we'll go ahead and set this to 2 right now. And so it says my hair is sticking out to the sides rather than perpendicular to the hill. Is this normal at this stage? I would almost have to see what you're talking about. Let me just go ahead and bring you up as a presenter real quick so we can see your screen. Because when you say sticking out to the sides, that's way too vague for me to know exactly what you mean. So here's Robert's screen when he clicks the button. Alright, so yeah, it is kind of sticking out to all of the different sides. Well, right now it's probably just following the, my first guess would be it's following the surface normals of your hill, which right this second I'm not going to worry about. We can always change this direction a little bit later, but for the time being, yeah, it's just going to be, now hang on a second, if you take a look, have you adjusted your tangent at all? Go under velocity. Try tweaking that. And it's starting to bring it back up. And so now you can just kind of offset your values starting from there. So see, you can kind of do a little bit of back and forth and get something close to what you're looking for. All right, so I think that's enough to kind of get you rolling. So I'm going to go ahead and take control back from you. And welcome back to my screen. Okay, so moving forward from here, let's see, where did I leave off? We just set up our materials. Now, I do also want to mention this. If you uncheck Emitter, actually, this is a quick error I'll mention in the notes, because right now it says unchecking parent will hide the hill. Actually, unchecking the emitter will hide the hill. I saw one thing and I typed another. If you uncheck this, it will look no different in the viewport. However, when you hit F12, you'll notice the hill geometry disappears. We're going to use this to our advantage a little bit later, because we're going to have a special object that throws out that grass that kind of gets hit when we swing the club. But I just want to point that particular property out to you so you know what that does. Now, just to smooth out our hair a little bit, I'm going to throw out something that's and it really is kind of optional at this point, but we will get slightly smoother results. We're going to activate B-Spline, and this is just going to take the shape of the hair and interpolate it using splines. So it'll smooth things out a little bit. Admittedly, this would be more important if you were doing actual hair effects, but it also will tend to make things look a little bit nicer here as well. We can set the steps down to 2, though, instead of 3, so it's a little less intense. Now, real quick, what I want to do is just everybody to put your hands up and then back down once you get this. So basically, if I don't see any hands move, I'm going to understand that everybody's pretty much right where they need to be. So put your hand up if you're still working on this, if you're still catching up. It's probably the easiest way to do that. And most people are catching up pretty quick, because this is actually a pretty easy thing to get through. All right, now, moving down from here, we're going to go under our display settings. And we're going to leave this set to rendered. I just want to point this out. You can switch this to none. For those of you who are already having viewport draw issues where your viewport's sluggish or for anything like that, turning off your particles can be a nice way to speed things back up, because you can make it so that they don't show in the viewport, but when you press F12 and render, they're still going to be there. Generally speaking, when you get done with your grass effect and you know it looks exactly the way you want it to, then... Oh yeah, Robert, you won't actually get a hand button anymore because you're a presenter. I don't know if I can demote you back to just regular attendee. No, I can't. So that's okay. I'm just going to assume that you're with me. And if you're not with me, then, you know, shout at me or something. But generally, you're pretty quick, so I'm not too stressed about it. Let's see. Now, moving down from here, just wanted to point out the bit about display. Now, the next bit, and this is probably the most important area for making our grass behave and start to look more like grass, is going to be underneath children. Now, the idea of the children group is to allow you to create additional strands of hair, strands of grass in this case, that are cheaper to calculate than actual additional particles. So what this means is each one of these little strands that we see here, each one of these will get its own number of children particles as well. I want you to set this over to interpolated and watch what happens. You immediately get a whole bunch more grass. Now right now, the display is set to 10. That means for every one of our original particles, we are showing 10 more. If I hit F12 though, we end up seeing a whole lot more than that. In fact, it takes a little bit longer to render. Please keep this in mind. Rendering out grass will slow things down a little bit. And if I sound like a Cylon right now, I'm sorry. Do I sound like a Cylon right now?
It's not that bad, actually.
Well, that's good. Yeah, everybody remember to save, because this is a particle effect, and particle effects, more than just about anything else that I traditionally teach, have a funny habit of destroying computers. Especially if your computer just isn't set up for this. Also, just kind of as a general statement, like a blanket warning to everybody, your mileage may vary. Meaning that, you know, if you have a computer that's not as powerful as mine, you may need to take your settings and tone them down a little bit. Like, you may not be able to actually handle 5,000 particles in your view without stuff exploding. So if that happens, pull it back down to 1,000 and build up from there. You'll still learn all of the key principles that I need you to learn. If you still don't like your hair, Robert, roll with it for now. Let's wait until we get the materials in place and get everything done from there, and then we can start tweaking from that point out. It also may be worth your while, and we'll consider this, to drop in a brand new hill. Because I mean, yeah, there you go. You're right there on top of me. You actually said I'll try making a new hill, because it takes like 5 seconds. You make a new plane, scale it out to 8, subdivide it. I think I use like 21 times or something, and then do a pull up from the center using proportional editing to a value of 3.5. So I can actually make that hill off the top of my head now. That's how many times I've done this. Okay, so we have a bunch of grass sticking out in all kinds of directions, but we're going to change a few things about these child particles, because as you might have caught on already, the child particles are really what is going to drive this effect home. Now at this point though, our grass is really thick. If I just hit F12 one more time to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, and you guys will have to bear with me. I should have just probably hit F11 because the last render was probably just sitting there waiting for me. But that's all right. Here you go. The grass is so thick that it gets to be a little tricky to tell what it is you're actually looking at. So what we're going to do is take a quick break away, and we're going to kind of jump forward and do one of the simpler steps of our material setup. We're going to create the material for the ground. So jump back over to your material tab. Oh yeah, did I switch back over to Cylon voice? That's awesome. So no, I'm back to talking again. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit plus, and I'm going to create a new material. And here's how hard this is going to be, folks. I'm just going to take the diffuse and set it to black. Then, because I am picky about this sort of thing, I'm going to take, under shading, I'm going to check shadeless. This means we're going to ignore all specularity. This hill is just going to be black on black on black. Think of the base material for the hill as being the shadow underneath your grass. So just think of that and you should be fine. All right, and Robert Preston hit his mute button. Way to go! That sounds like something I would do, actually. So bear with me. I'm going to hit render one more time, and I'll try not to talk while I do it. Actually, I want to talk. I want to sound like a Cylon, seriously. By your command. Like, if that worked, I'll be so excited right now. Oh, my phone's ringing.
At least it wasn't shared.
Okay, cool. So now we have this black on black. Now the reason it's black on black, if we jump back over to our particles, if anybody can guess, is if we go under render, it still says we're looking for material 2. What we would need to do to make the grass not look black is add another material, and we can go ahead and just click new and then not do anything to it. And we'll clean up our materials in a second, but as soon as we do that, and I'm going to hit F12 once again, even if it means robot voice, because I'm just trying to illustrate points here. And, man, I really wish I did sound like a... I wish I had a Cylon button over... I think I need to talk to Citrix and say, guys, we need a make sound like Cylon button that I can just hit and leave on all the time. So there we go. So now we can see the ground is dark, and, of course, the grass is not, but you can already see how our materials... excuse me. You already see how our materials on the ground are giving the impression of shadow, and that's going to be really, really handy as we move forward. Okay, but we're not done actually setting up the particles yet. We're almost there. So back under children, let me go ahead and close up render, get that out of the way. Go back under children. We have some values we're going to be setting up. First off, I'm going to set my rendered amount really high. I'm going to set mine up to 200. If you don't want to do that on your end, you don't have to do that on your end. It is going to make rendering take a little bit longer, but your grass will look a whole lot thicker. But if you want to start out with a very low number like 50, just for the sake of rendering out initially and then thicken it up when you're done, you can do that too. I just want to let you know our final value is going to be 200, okay? So I'm going to leave it low right now, but you guys understand why. Okay, under the effects column, we're going to change our shape value to something really low, like 0.064. Now, all these values I came up with just by scrubbing through over and over and finding just the right amount. So they're kind of like magic numbers, and I apologize for that. And let's see, is there a possibility to render a region? There is, and honestly, I can't remember how I've done it. I feel like I've done it before, though, and it's just been a while. I just got so used to pressing F12 that I stopped doing it. But I feel like there is a way to do that, and forgive me for not being able to just spout that off the top of my head. So if any of you out there actually remember how to do a render region, just want to mention that in BuzzNet, that would be great. Let's see, now... Continuing on with our settings, under the roughness column, we're going to take the size, and what this is just controlling the overall situationing, the positioning of our children particles. And we're going to set the size to 0.5. See, Ilara just said, I think it's Shift P or Control P maybe. Well, let's just Shift P. I think we have to make a selection first. Neither one of those are doing much of anything at all. But I would probably have to have a selection already made.
Do you need to be in the 3D view?
Yeah, I would kind of sort of hope not. But that's okay. Let me just get back to setting up my particles real quick. So we're going to take our size over here and set that to 0.5. We're going to take our shape and kick that up to 9. So that's actually jumping up pretty high. Our random value, so for our random placement, is going to be 0.2. Size we're going to increase by 10% to 1.1. And we're going to take the threshold and set that to 0.08. So once you've got all that, I'm going to do another quick temporary render. And there you go. So you see things are looking a whole lot rougher. We can see some curling in the grass. Overall, I mean, it really does look like some gray grass. And now that's at a value of 50. Now once we get done with our material, our grass is going to be a lot dimmer. There's not going to look like there's as much of it. But right now things are looking pretty good. I said, anyone else's hair go nuts? Yeah, this is one of those things where your mileage may vary. If that happens, you may need to take your settings and just increase them one by one, because it very well could be it's probably your random value. There could be all kinds of things that you have adjusted. Particles are going to be like this. Particle values are always going to be like this. From one scene to the next, if you've built to any kind of different scale, if you have anything different about your geometry or your scene, then things will get different for you. So you cannot expect exactly the same results. It's just kind of how it works. Now, some people are saying that they scaled their random back to 0.05, and that helped things out on their end. So let's see. If I set this all the way up to like a value of straight up 2 and hit 12, what happens? This should be good. Now, if that's what you're talking about with crazy, you might have hit 2 instead of 0.2. But if you didn't, again, just please keep in mind particle effects are just one of those things. Just about anything that ever gets simulated is going to have a little bit of variation from one scene to the next. It just depends on so many individual factors. But really, the key thing I want you to walk away from this from is because we're adjusting the children locations right here, our goal is to essentially control the overall adjustment and placement of these children particles, how they're being brought into the scene. So as you play with these values, you'll be able to adjust the random direction of each one of these children, how they're clumped and grouped together. So it's more important that you understand kind of the sweeping overall idea behind these settings. Now somebody has already asked a question, how do you set the grass color? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's actually our next thing. But before we jump into setting the grass color, I want to take just a quick 5-minute break for people to catch up, and I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while we do that. So here comes a pause. Okay, so we are back, and now we're going to set up the materials for our grass, or material singular. We only have the one. But let's go ahead and select our object once again, and let me close. We don't really need so much outliner visible. I just have a ridiculous amount of outliner showing. Now I'm going to jump over to materials, and I've already got 2 materials set up so far. We made the black one to drop onto the ground itself. We made a second one that we could put on the grass, and it'd be a really good idea to start naming these things. So let's name the first one ground, and we'll name the other one grass. We'll keep this very, very simple. Now for the grass, I want you to take the diffuse color and just set it to a dark-ish shade of green. The specifics of that color are not particularly important, you know, so I've got this slightly brighter than olive drab green, and that's fine. That's all you really need. You don't really need to play much with the specular settings, but that is something you can pay attention to later and come back and tweak. That's the great thing about these particle settings, though I realize some of you who have to do a lot of rendering, and the rendering is slow. That's probably going to give you a bit of a headache. This is where I get to boast about the speed of my computer again. I want you to go down under transparency and turn that on and leave this set to Z transparency. I'm just going to keep our grass looking a little nicer as it stacks up in front of each other. Now, moving down from here underneath your strand settings, because we are rendering these strands of hair, we have some things to change. First off, take your surface diffuse, and we're going to crank that up to 5. It doesn't really need to be that far, but what that is, it's a distance in Blender units over which the surface normal of your hill will be used to calculate specularity as opposed to the individual direction of each strand. It will help kind of unify any specular highlights across your grass and just make things look a lot smoother. So definitely remember that setting. Then we have the size. Root tip, it's pretty basic. Just, you know, how big do you want the grass to be at its base and at its height. We're going to set the base to 1.5. We're going to set the tip to as small as it'll go, which I believe is 0.25. I don't think you can set it any lower than that. Now, moving on, this actually brings us to the second page of our notes, if you're actually following along. I'm just curious, I'm just going to ask and see if folks will just respond over in BuzzNet. Does anybody actually print these, or do you just leave them up on your screen? Is there anybody out there helping me in the effort of killing trees? Okay, I'm seeing mostly on screen, but a couple people print. Actually, Google Docs works great on certain mobile devices as well. So if you have something like an iPad or something, that's also really slick if you haven't done that yet. Okay, now moving on with our material. Under Options, turn off Traceable. Please turn off Traceable. This actually can speed some things up. Because notice what it says. Include this material and geometry that uses it in ray tracing calculations. No, you don't want to calculate your grass in ray tracing. And now, if you have stuff that needs to reflect, you may want to consider that, though I haven't really checked to see how nicely Blender will reflect grass, so your mileage may vary in that. But go ahead and turn that off anyway, just to be on the safe side. Now it's time for us to make this start to look a little bit more like grass. Also, be aware over in your preview at the very top of your material, you have a hair strands button you can check, and that'll start to give you a clearer idea, not perfectly clear, but clearer idea of what these strands will look like. And that's pretty cool. You will notice that there is kind of a funny thing going on if you look at this, where you can really obviously see where each strand starts and ends. And as nice as that seems at first, it's a little... it will kind of break the effect to see the grass popping out quite so harshly. So we're going to blend it in, and then we'll blend it back out as well. I'm going to press F12, though, and get a render of what we got so far. So yeah, there we go. Best grass ever, I'm thinking. No, we still have work to do. So let's jump over to our textures panel, and I'll go ahead and press F11 over here. And doesn't that look cool? I mean, really? Seriously? I just want to point out how awesome that looks. Okay, so anyway, we're going to create a brand new texture. And somebody said, how do you set this material to the grass particles effect? I'm so glad you asked, though we did cover it, and it is in your notes. I just want to point that out to you because it's fun. If you jump over to your Particles tab where you have your grass all set up, go underneath Render, and you got Material. And that number corresponds to what material entry in your list of materials the grass is going to be paying attention to. We have it set to 2. So if we jump over to Materials, you'll see we have ground, and then we have grass. So we're paying attention to 2. Incidentally, because we just made something, it looks like we have purple grass. I have to hit render. I must see this purple grass. Oh, that's the best. I want a yard full of that stuff. I really do. So bad. Okay, back over to textures. So we don't, yeah, okay, purple, pink, magenta, fuchsia colors. We're going to take our type and set this from clouds over to blend. We want this to be a blend. And of course, we want to be able to control this blend, so check your ramp to turn this on. Now, here's the catch, folks. I have set up an entire list in your notes of what all the stops are. Now, I've called them flags in the notes. Please understand that's just a Photoshop term. It's the same thing as a stop, so I hope folks don't get too terribly confused by that. But here's how this is going to work. We have our very first stop, which you can just click on the left side of that ramp, and you can change its position by clicking and dragging, and you can change its color and alpha value by using the little color picker here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to click the color picker. We want the color to be black, so we don't have to touch that at all. We can leave it just as it is. And we want our alpha to actually be... Actually, I want to leave the alpha at 0 in this case. I think I have alpha 1 there, don't I? Well, let's leave the alpha at 1. Let's just see what happens. Actually, because our ground is black, that's a good idea. So we'll leave the alpha all the way at 1. Sorry, I'm thinking and I'm writing at the same time, and that's probably not a good idea. So color of black, alpha of 1, like so. All right, now our second flag, we have to actually add... well, actually, incidentally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this flag over on the right-hand side and just bring that over. So our second flag is going to have a position of 0.25. So this is not an exact science. Close is close enough. If you have like 0.253 or 0.249, that's just as good. So no stress there. Take your color, make it black. Take your alpha and make that 0.9. So you're already starting to fade this out a little bit. Now we need a new stop, so we'll go ahead and click the Add button, and it just adds in a new flag. we'll just drag that to our next position, which is 0.5. Like so. And then we're going to change our color and our alpha. Our color is going to be a dark green this time, so we'll leave the tone down pretty low, drag this over to green. Get a nice, deep, dark green. Now I sound like Bob Ross. And we'll take our alpha value and set that down to 0.7. Yeah, let's get a nice happy green here. And I want to check my alpha over here. Okay, alpha of 0.9, that's good. Okay, now, next flag. We'll go ahead and hit add a happy little flag. I'm sorry, I'm on Bob Ross kick now. We'll go ahead and open up our color swatch again. The next one is going to be a dim green, and I chose the word dim because it's not medium. I'm assuming medium is like right there. We're going to do a medium green. And we'll set our alpha to 0.6. Or thereabouts. Like so.
Who's Bob Ross?
Yeah, you just failed. You know, the internet tells you everything. If you Google search Bob Ross, you'll have him found in less than the time it would take for you to ask that question. I just want to point that out. All right, so I'm going to click Add and drag out one more time to a position of about 0.9. That's close enough. And we'll change our color, and this will be a nice medium green, so obviously much brighter, and I'll saturate this out a little bit more. And we want our alpha to be 0.5. So our grass is getting, well, it's not paler, it's getting more transparent as it grows outward. Now here's the funny thing. If you decided, hey, it'd be a good idea to try to render right now, things will not be what you think they should be. You get something that looks kind of like this, which is pretty scary. The reason for this is you haven't set your mapping up yet. So we're going to go under mapping and take your coordinates, set those to strand particle. That's critical. So if we go ahead and hit F12 here, there you go. Our colors are starting to come through. But then the last thing I want to do is jump down under influence and make sure that we're not only influencing the color. Remember, we set up all these alpha channels too for transparency, so we want to make sure that we also check alpha, so that's being taken into account as well. And now if we press F12, your grass will seem a lot richer. Now, at this point, you can play with certain settings. Like if this just doesn't look thick enough, now you can jump back over to your particle system. Actually, you have all kinds of things you can control. Like, for instance, we could take our specularity, which is currently, I'll admit, a little bright, and we could pull that down, or even give it just the tiniest bit of a greenish tinge. And so, let me do a quick comparison here. Now, I probably already have some various renders in different slots here. It looks like I don't, so let's just switch this over to slot 5, and we'll hit F12. And then you can compare in between the two. So there's slot 4 with a much brighter specularity. There's slot 5 with much dimmer. By all means, tweak that specularity until you're happy. Until you have happy little strands of grass. And let's see, Iron Soul has put up a picture that he wants everybody to know is scary. So what I'm going to do, just for Mr. Preston, is we're going to bring up his picture in front of everybody. That is kind of scary, now that you mention it. It looks like a hairy hill, doesn't it? Alright. Now, is that with a rebuilt hill, or is that just with the hill that you had originally? I'm curious. I'm waiting for a response. Oh, it's still the original bad one. Okay. I'm pretty sure that's going to be some geometry setting there, or something that you've got going on with the geometry is kind of interesting. You could just try resetting your normals and see if that helps. Incidentally, let me go ahead and chug along here. So really, that about wraps things up for the grass. The last thing I'm going to do is jump back over, and remember, I set my children all the way down to 50. If I take this and set it, I'm just going to double it, just for the sake of one render. We'll set this up to 100, and let's jump back down to slot 4. And I'll press F12. Of course, this will take a little bit longer to render. Control N should reset your normals. And you see the grass is now a whole lot thicker. And you see the difference between the two. So, set that until you get something you like. If you don't like the color of your grass, then you can jump back over to, Control N in case my Cylon voice masked it. And sorry about my Cylon voice. There's not much to be done for it, though. So if we go back over to our grass and check our textures, if you need like a different shade of green, you want like a deeper color, all you have to do is start grabbing some of these flags and adjust the particular shade you're using, change your saturation, etc. to whatever you think looks better. All right, so that's it. At this point, you now should have something fairly grass-like spoken up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and I want people to put your hands up and then back down once you're caught up. Okay, so at this stage of the game, we have some grass. Now, if you haven't yet, it's going to be a good idea to make sure that everything is named. We did a good job of naming our materials, but we did kind of skimp on our texture, and that's a bad habit. So let's just take the ramp texture we're using for our grass, and we'll call this something like grass text. Just something, I'll take the slash out. Just something so that we know what that's here for. And there you have it. Now, the next thing we're going to create is going to be the grass that gets kicked up when our character swings his golf club. And this is a multi-stage process. The first thing we're going to do is actually model out a blade of grass that we can use. So let's start there. So somewhere in your scene off camera, there's no real right or wrong as to where this is going to be. I'm just going to place my 3D cursor, hit Shift-A, and we'll add in a plane. Now you can make this blade of grass as big or small as you want because we can make adjustments to its size in the particle system. But because it's me, I'm going to scale things down. And somebody just suggested do it in a separate layer. That's a workflow thing. Like what I would probably do is just create it and then stick it on a separate later. But if I ever needed to see it, sometimes I will just leave stuff floating off camera. It's just one of those kind of workflow preferences things. One blade of grass isn't probably going to mean much to anybody. But yeah, absolutely. When you get done with it, you can tap the M key and push it off onto any old layer you want to. All right, so let's make this into a blade of grass. I'm going to hit the Tab key. I'm going to hit Control R, and I'm going to put a seam right down the middle of this guy, and we'll kind of frame up on it. And I'm going to move that down to try to make kind of a V shape. If I can't, why can't I? Well, obviously that would be because proportional editing is on, so let's turn that off. Hit G and drag that down. Make that sort of concavity that you generally will see in grass. Now I'm going to grab these two edges on what I'm just calling the front. And I'm just going to hit Control and, in my case, right-click. If you haven't reversed your selection buttons for Blender, then it's going to be left-click for you. But I can just make a few clicks to wave this around a little bit, about like so. Pretty simple. Then, just, because it's fun, we can turn proportional editing on and pull this up a little bit, rotate it a little bit, irregularities, they're great. Scale this down to a point. And just like that, we have a blade of grass. Now, if, just to be on... Sorry, again, please, with the grass extrusion. There's nothing to it. At this point, you've done enough modeling where you should already know how to extrude. So I shouldn't need to repeat that. If you just need the hotkey, that's just going to be Control, and in my case, it's the right mouse button. In your case, it could be left if you haven't reversed your buttons, because I do not use Blender's native use right-click for everything. I find that annoying, so I've flipped those in my settings. Yeah, it's just Control, and again, my case, right-click, yours, left-click. Okay, now, just as a matter of preference, and you don't necessarily have to do this, because, it is going to make your geometry a little more complicated than it was, but admittedly, not by much. You can put a little bit of solidify on here to give this a little thickness. The only other thing I would do at this point is I would hit my T key and smooth this guy out. It just makes everything look all nice and curvy. And that's just in case you get like a freeze frame of one of these for some silly reason. You don't want people to see how geometric your blade of grass is. Now, don't be afraid at this point either to take just a moment, if you want to make like a really, much more randomized look to your grass, maybe turn off your proportional editing. You can start kind of reshaping things. It's not going to matter much because, again, these are going to be really small, but you just want something that looks a little bit organic, a little bit random. Now, we'd also want to name this. It's important to give this a name, so let's go over to our object panel, and instead of calling this plane, which is kind of irresponsible, let's name it grass blade. Also, we need to give this a material, so we'll jump over to our materials area, click plus, click new, and this is going to be so simple. I'm going to pull down my specularity and just give this a nice medium green color that is somewhat close to what I had on the grass. It doesn't have to be dead on at all, but we can always come back and tweak it later if we need to. And I noticed Streeter just said, I've been using right-click for too long, I can't go back. I totally understand. It's just that I use so many other 3D applications where right-click is kind of your extra button for additional features that I just can't make myself use the mindset of Blender in that one aspect. It drives me bananas. And the couple of times I've tried it, I tried going back to any of my other 3D apps. Oh, man. Hang it up. It was terrible. Like, I forgot how to use Maya. Everything about Maya. I totally forgot it. All right, so real quick, I'm going to pause the video, and we're going to see if everybody's got a blade of grass. All right, so we're back, and now we're going to create the object that will spit out our grass. Now, obviously, this is probably going to need to happen somewhere nearby the golf ball and the tee. Now, you'll notice I've got the old golf ball in this scene. Just ignore that for now. That's just the fact that I'm using a lot of different files to teach this class, and right now we're focused on particles anyway. But I'm going to select the golf ball and hit Shift-S and bring the cursor to selected. Just kind of move the 3D cursor right out here. And then we'll hit Shift-A, and I'm going to add in an icosphere. It really doesn't matter what you add. I like the spherical nature of a sphere, and an icosphere is generally a simpler object than a UV sphere, so this is just my choice, but really what you use isn't that big of a deal. I would probably recommend that it be something along the lines of a sphere or maybe a box. And we need to name this right away so we don't forget. We're going to call this Grass Thrower. Now, if you want to be all kind of special, just in case you're looking at your outliner later, you can put like underscore hidden underneath this, just to let everybody know that this is not going to render. Or put whatever kind of code word you want, so like not rendered, or something like that, just so that you know that at time of render, this guy will not be visible. So that you don't end up like looking for it in your scene, or if you see it in your scene, be like, oh yeah, that was supposed to be hidden. Okay, so for starters, this guy could probably be a lot smaller, so let's scale it down. And just to make things a little clearer, I'm going to move it, and I'm going to take my golf ball, and this is just a visual thing so people don't get visually confused. I'm going to make my golf ball red. So you can pretty much ignore the red golf ball because we're just going to be looking at this grass thrower object. Okay, so obviously for starters, we need a particle system. So jump over to your particles tab, again, with your grass thrower object selector. Don't select the golf ball by accident. And we'll click plus and add in a brand new particle system. We're going to leave this set to emitter this time. Obviously, we don't need hair. We're not doing a grass-like effect anymore. And we're going to set our number to around 20. You can lift this up or down as you need more or less grass. But for now, we'll set it to 20. Now the next part we have to set, and this is where you will probably have to scrub through your animation to find the perfect time, because right now you're already spitting out particles. They're falling through the scene. There's these little orange dots that you see here. We need to know exactly when these particles should be spit out into the scene. So you'll have to scrub through and find exactly that moment when your club should be striking the ball. So I'm going to kind of scrub through real gently, and right about here. So in my case, I'm at about frame 242 right before I hit, so we could say around 245 I should be impacting. Now understand, this is a really fast swing. If you aim for right here when the club is like right in contact, things may look a little bit off. But notice, like here in my case, just specifically for me, at frame 243, I haven't even hit the ball yet. At 244, I'm way past the ball already because I'm moving that fast. So I'm actually going to kick up to about 245 before I start spitting out that grass. And that extra 1 frame delay, I promise, is going to make all the difference in making this really feel like it's natural, like that grass just kind of flew out as an effect of your club. So don't worry about trying to sync it up to the exact moment the grass hits the ball. You want that little bit of a delay. All right, so we're going to take our start and we'll punch in 245. Again, though, your mileage may vary. It's going to be really just a couple of frames after you have hit the ball in your file, if you're following along. Next, end time is just the very next frame. So we'll do 246. What does that mean?
Your start didn't take.
I know, I love it when that happens. 245. So this means we're going to spit out all 20 of our particles over that course of 1 frame. So if I just rewind this a couple of frames, and let's see, let me just go into a wireframe view for now. Also, just for sake of simplicity, I'm going to jump down under my hair, and we'll go under display, and I'm going to turn on none. So I'm just going to hide the hair from the view. It'll still render, I just don't want to see it while we're sitting here working. So let's back up just a little bit, and I'll hit play. And there you go. I mean, it actually kind of looks like he just busted something right there, which is great. That's a great way to start this off. One more time. Pop. And if you notice a couple little jitters, don't worry about that just yet. Sometimes particle systems will do that. Especially if you're dropping frames. I just want to mention that. If you're getting slow playback and you if you turn on dropping frames, your simulation will start to get a little buggy. So generally when working with emitted particles that are having to play through your scene, it's a good idea to go with no sync, even if it means you get slower feedback in the view. Your particles will be much more cleanly representative of what they should be doing. Okay. Now for lifetime, you can tweak that a little bit later. Basically when the particles need to die, you can kill that, but 50 frames should be pretty good for now. Alright, so now moving down from here, we have our velocity area, which is where we're going to start off. What I want to do is change this over so that we're using our emitter object to control the direction these particles are going to fly out. And the values that I'm going to be using are 2 in X, 2 in Y, and then 8 in Z. Now watch what this does. If we back up, hit play. They kind of fly off into Crazy Town. Hang on, jump over here. Pop. So they fly off in kind of entirely the wrong direction. But what you're going to need to do is take your object, whatever it is that's emitting your particles, and you're going to need to rotate it such that the z-axis now points in the direction you want your grass to go. Grass to go, thank you. So let's turn on local, and I'll hit control space so I can see my manipulator. And I'm just going to rotate this so that z kind of points forward. And let's just see what that does for us. There we go. And that's spitting out more in the direction I've got in mind. So in my case, I've aimed it up. I mean, it's not quite a 45-degree angle, just something that's obviously forward, because you want your grass to move forward. So real quick, I'm going to pause the video, and I want to make sure that people are caught up to this point. So we're back. Now, over the break, Mohammed did have a question, and I actually checked out his screen. It was like great, and if you're watching the video, you missed this really eventful space battle where creatures came down from the stars, and we all got together and fought them off. And I'm sorry you missed that. But what happened was he couldn't set his start value any higher than 200. The reason being his end value was set to 200. So if you have something like 100 here, and we take our end and set it to 200, but then you come back over to start and you be like, oh, I need to set this to like 250. Well, you can't, because the start can never be higher than the end, which can be a little frustrating, but I understand why they'd want to do that, because it could cause all sorts of funny little internal issues. So I'm going to set this back over to 246 for the end. And good, and 245 here. And that all looks good. And my grass is still kind of weird, says Iron Soul. Let's see how weird his grass is, shall we? And why doesn't everybody see how weird Robert Preston's grass looks? Good, maybe. I think it's a really good start. I think maybe your specularity is kind of cranked up a bit. I think you're just missing some settings now. The direction of your grass is going to be the important thing. So go back over your notes and double check all of those little check boxes, and I think you're going to be just fine. That looks a lot more promising than what I was seeing before. All right, so back over here. We're now spitting out our particles in the direction we need them to be spit, and that's good. That's our first critical step. Now, next, we need to adjust. Well, I'd like to adjust our rotation, but it's a little soon for that. Let's change our render, because if we start playing with rotation and everything, it's going to be hard to tell what's going on when we're just looking at points. And I've got everything in the notes listed kind of in order from top to bottom, but that doesn't really help us very much. So if you look under render, we have all these different ways we can render these. We can have halos, we can have billboards, we can have groups. What we want to set this to is object. And this allows you to point out an object in your scene that will be instanced for each and every particle. So if we grab this and we choose grass blade, watch this. We have a whole bunch of little instances of the grass blade just floating there in space. And if we rewind and hit play, pop. We just spit those out and they go flying. Now, how cool is that, really? I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. But we have some things we need to change in order to make that look a little better. So first off, our size would be a good thing to update. So I'm going to kind of scrub forward until we have some floating blades of grass here. And then we can take our random size and start playing with that just to get variation. Don't worry too much about making them the appropriate size here. You just want to change that overall variation. In fact, cranking that all the way up to 1 is pretty nice. Next, if we go over to our actual object. So let's see, next I have rotation. So let's see, we have a couple of different things we want to change here. First off, we're going to change our velocity random just a little bit, and that's going to change the rate at which all of these are flying out. Well, I'm sorry, it's going to change their rotations randomly, so they're not all going to be rotated in the same direction. If we come over here and let that pop and recalculate, so now you can see they're all rotated in various directions, which is good. Now we're also going to take our random factor and increase that. We're going to push this to about 0.7. And we'll rewind and hit play. Let me jump ahead a little bit. So there we go. So I've adjusted the random velocity a little bit, and I've adjusted the random rotation. Now we also want to change their angular velocity as well. So I'm going to take their spin and set it to about 0.6. Now you need to recalculate when you do this, but watch what happens. Boom. So now they're all kind of spinning. Now this moves us on to the physics section. So if we look under physics, now we're going to kind of change a lot of little things, actually. First off, we can change our size a bit. So if we come here, this is where you can change the size of your grass. So if you need like gigantic blades of grass flying out of the ground, you can do that. But pull these down to something that looks reasonable. Don't be afraid to try a test render to make sure the size is about where you need it to be. I just want to mention that. I mean, that looks pretty good, just for pieces of grass. In the end, the effect you're going for is not that he's pulling this grass out by the roots. He's actually doing a pretty nice little golf swing. He's just kind of clipping the top of the grass. If anything, the grass is overgrown. If anybody hasn't realized that, this grass is way too tall for a golf course. But that's okay. So pull that down, and then, of course, you've got your random size you can adjust as well, which just gives you a little more randomization. We'll go ahead and leave that at 1, though. Okay, now moving down from here, we're going to change the forces that are applied to this. We're going to kick up the Brownian motion by 20. Now, this is another one of those areas. Anytime you start playing with forces, anytime you start playing with anything that is calculated dynamically, meaning that it's like a simulation, your mileage may vary. by a bit. So these are just numbers to get you started, and then you can tweak to get the behavior you're actually looking for. But in the end, I don't want this grass to fly very far. Grass is light. Grass gets caught on the air. There's a lot of drag applied to it. So we'll kick up our Brownian motion just to kind of make it waver around in the air. We'll take our drag and set that to 1. And then here's a really critical one for the tweaking, okay? Set your damp. In my case, I have a really precise value set in, but I had to spend a while kind of going back and forth. I've set this to 0.0683, and that sounds like a crazy magic number, but again, it's just kind of a place to get you started. Now, if we swing and play, you see our grass doesn't go anywhere near as far anymore. Pop. And then just falls to the ground. And that's pretty much it. You now have some grass. So now we can play through, pause right about there, and let's hit F12. And you can see the grass getting kicked up. And at this point, it'd be a good idea to just take a few test renders. You can adjust that overall size, adjust your random size, whatever you need to do to get that grass to be exactly the proportion you need it to be at. The last thing, and you can't forget this, what's our problem right now in our render? Obviously, we can see our throwing object, and that's not cool. So what we're going to do is press F11, and if you run down under your render settings, take your emitter and just switch that off. And then that way, when you render, you have no more emitter object. Or in the non-Cylon version, you don't have the emitter object anymore. So what I want to do is go ahead and pause the video, and I want folks to catch up to this point if you haven't already. And take a look. So we're back for just a minute, and I'm going to pass control back over to Mohammed just a minute, who apparently is not seeing any grass. So we're going to make him a presenter. So I'm no longer the presenter. All right, and you got your grass strand all set up. Oh, I already see the problem. Do you see anybody else see the problem? Raise your hand if you see the problem. I can't see your hands go up, but raise them anyway. Take a look over in your render settings. What did you do? What did you do? It's actually in your notes too. Take a look at your notes. Under the render setting, we said uncheck the emitter, and we said take the duplicate object and set that to grass blade, not the parent. The parent is really just there to give you something to use for the local coordinate system. You don't want to do that at all. If anything, you'd want to set that to your icosphere, to your grass thrower. And really, you can just leave it blank. Grass thrower hidden. You could set it right there if you wanted to. Now take your duplicate object and set that to the grass blade. Scroll down, grass strand, dun, 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 and there you go. There's bits and pieces of grass everywhere. That's what you needed. And I think you're still muted. I think because I'm horrible. Because I'm basically a terrible person. Now we can hear you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, okay. Right now I can see just a piece of grass. So just one.
Play back through.
Just hanging.
Yeah,
right
play
there.
back through.
I don't know my PC can handle it right now with all the free softwares running.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
Okay, and yeah. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, we're getting super lag from you, but it should be spitting out now. It looks like the next thing you need to...
Yeah, okay, right now you should see it.
Yeah, the next thing you're going to have to take a look at is like your random size, your random rotation, basically all that stuff that's in the notes listed under things like velocity, check rotation, physics, and render, and then you should be good to go.
Yeah, sure, right now it's user preferences stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So does that cover your question?
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot. Very, very much.
Awesome. No problem at all. And I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Sorry I left you muted when I put you back as presenter. I'm horrible, and you're welcome to make fun of me.
No, it's okay. I'm having fun while I'm at it. So.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks to you.
All right, now you're muted again. Hopefully I'll remember to unmute you when next time I make you a presenter. That's so embarrassing and hilarious. Okay, so show my screen. And somebody said... I had some questions that came in. What size did you use for the grass strands? Do you mean the ones that are actually planted in the hill, or the ones... Oh, he says, never mind, I got it. I mean, if you mean this 3D one, it really doesn't matter what size you make it, because you can adjust that at the particle level later on. And yeah, it's probably a good habit to select this guy and put him on some layer that, you're not going to see him on. Watch the grass fly. And there you have it. So at this stage of the game, you should now have some grass, all kicking up and looking great and doing awesome things. What's the button to link two vertices with an edge? F, I think. And I try not to answer questions over there, but, you know, sometimes I see them and they're easy. So that is it for creating our effects. There's really only one more thing that I want to demonstrate today. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap things up a little earlier than usual, but we've still run for a couple of hours, all things told. So what we're going to do is take a look at some Vertex painting. So I'm going to save my scene. And I implore all of you guys to do the same. Because this is something I thought some of you would want to know. Because I figure if you're following along, you're like, oh, this is great. I can make grass now. But, you know, this particle system is actually for hair, right? So how can I get started making hair? Well, I'm not going to turn this into a great big hair lesson. That would be cool. But it's kind of outside the scope. But I did want to show you a couple of neat things. I'm going to file new. And I'm going to hit Shift A, stare at Blender, and everybody clap together. Yay, Blender! All right, that was amazing. Let's go ahead and reopen Blender. Huzzah! Okay, so now, same thing, only better, with less suckage. Let's hit Shift-A, and let's bring in, I don't even care what, but let's do an icosphere, which, just because I want to, I'm going to kick the divisions up to 3 instead of just 2, right? And there you have that. Now, watch this. Here, I'm going to show you guys something that I want you to at least be able to experiment with, all right? I'm giving you this as an additional tool to make you dangerous and to make you have more fun in life, because I think having fun is important. If you go under your Object Data panel over here in your Properties, you'll notice you have this whole area called Vertex Groups. Add one. And name this group Hair Density. Right? Now, just for the fun of it, jump immediately over to Particles, add a particle system, and take its type and set it over to hair. And you get hair everywhere, of course, like you're used to. Now watch this. Scroll down, and you'll see a little Vertex Group section down here. Expand that, and oop, there's a density area. Look at that. Check this, and set it to follow hair density. Now, currently, things are looking like they're not following anything. What I want to do now is take our mode and switch it over to weight painting. All right, and it's of course, obviously, when I'm trying to show off, this is going to happen. Oh wait, there we go. There we go. So as I paint it to red, you'll notice I'm actually wiping out all of the hair. It's actually going exactly the opposite direction I wanted it to, which is fine. So if I take my strength and kick it all up to 1, look at this. I can paint away all my hair. And then, guys, this is just kind of a bonus thing I thought I'd throw in for you to play with, especially for those of you who are scene freaks for making sure everything is as nice and clean as it can be on your scenes. Using these techniques that I'm showing you right now, you could make sure that the the grass on your field is only in certain locations. Kick my radius up and just make it huge. And it looks like it keeps bringing stuff back. Well, this demo's not doing at all what I wanted it to. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to do something kind of on the fly real quick. Let's do a new scene real quick. Let's bring in an icosphere. And give me more density. I like more density. It just makes me happy. And all I'm going to do is switch right over to Vertex Paint mode. Not Vertex Paint, Weight Paint. Thank you. And just paint some stuff out. And you notice that when you do that, actually, Blender is pretty cool about automatically creating a vertex group for you, which is pretty slick. Let me add in a particle system. Oh, you know what I'll bet it was? Hang on a second. Yeah, I'll bet that's what it was. Let's see, under emission, we've got this. Set this over to hair, and check advanced to make sure that that's on. I probably didn't check that last time. So I go back under vertex groups, and take my density, set that back over to group, and there you go. I just didn't check that advanced checkbox. I knew I was overlooking something, so you might want to add that to your notes. When you do what I'm doing, you want to add advanced to your type. Now here's the great thing. If you go back under your vertex groups, look at all these things you can control. You can control your length this way as well. Now let me make a couple of adjustments. So this first group, let's go ahead and go back to setting that as hair density. And let's make another group. We'll just hit plus, and we'll call this one hair length, like so. And look at this. As I jump between the two, you'll notice that the colorization of my sphere actually updates. And you can change this on the fly. If you hit shift left mouse, you can change different ones. So hair density, and I should probably add something to the length, so let's just paint a little bit like right here. And there you go. See, now if I hold down shift and hit left mouse, I can jump between hair density and hair length at any given time. Now why am I doing this? Well, I can go back over to that hair, take its length, and make it follow the hair length group. And now I can paint length on as well. So I take my weight, pull it down, and make sure we're painting length. I can shorten my hair. Let's pull it way down. Let's say like maybe 0.09 something. And now I have really short hair right there. And then I can hold down shift and left mouse and jump back over to density. And we can increase the density in these areas. And using these, and Wolfrey's all over it, you could give the character hair if you wanted to. I thought maybe that if I showed this, there'd be one or two of you out there who'd be really interested in maybe adding some hair to your character. And I didn't want to leave those people hanging out there with nothing to do. So this is a really nice way to control where you've got hair on a subject and all kinds of other stuff as well. So you can control that. You can also control the length. So if I kick up my weight, like I can make this one spot really long. I just wanted to show that off. It was just, okay, and Iron Soul was first, so credit where it's due, all that jazz. So there you go. That was just a really quick demonstration I wanted to throw out there. Now, I realized there was a really short bit of confusion while I completely forgot to check my advanced checkbox, but, you know, you might forget that too at some point, so that was useful. So what I'll do really quick, watch this. We'll hit Control-N and make a brand new file. And I'm going to run through this just one more time. So I'll hit Shift-A, and it doesn't matter what object you want to add. But something with a lot of vertices will help, obviously, because you're doing vertex weighting. So we'll do another icosphere, divide it by 3. And if you just go to weight painting, a vertex group will automatically be created, but you can create these manually. Just go under your objects data. You'll see vertex groups, click plus, and we'll name this hair density. Go ahead and jump under weight paint and just start painting. So we'll put a little section here with some really dense stuff on it. Now we'll jump over to particles, add a particle system. Take its type, and I'll make this nice and big so everybody can see. Take its type and set it to hair and check the advanced checkbox. Then scroll down to the bottom and under vertex groups, make sure that density is following the hair density vertex group. And that's the first part. With density, you're controlling where the hair should be. So we could, take our radius and pull it down and put some hair over here, do some sideburns, do kind of a widow's peak in the middle. Start really laying that stuff down. Then, let's go ahead and jump back over to our object data. Drop on another group, which we'll call hair length. Go back over and let's assign this as well. And of course, there's nothing on it right now. So we can start really slowly adding this, and I take my weight and pull it way down for this. And just start controlling that length. Now the length is already going to be slave to where density is. So you could just paint your length all over the place for starters. And see, we're already starting to get little sideburns and a little widow's peak on the side of our character. So anyway, that's really it. And somebody said, whoa, how do you paint back in blue? Take your weight and set it all the way back down to 0. And then you can just kick your strength up, and then you're basically erasing. So you're just controlling what weight you want to drop on there. Wow, super length. So, guys, what you got, Gav?
No, I was just going to say that's really cool.
Yeah,
that's much preferable to the combing operations in other well-known packages.
And there are some things like that here as well. But I thought I'd at least give you, this to play with and make you dangerous if you wanted to kind of play with that. And if you start combining this with some of the dynamic forces that can be applied to hair, so like the hair dynamic stuff, you can get some really fun results that will bounce around and look really, really cool with very little work on your part. So, guys, that's it for our demonstration today. That is the length of the class. So, are there any final questions? Is there anything that folks need to know about or anything? Really, that's it from my bag of treats for today. So, I guess this brings us to your assignment, what I'd like to see you get done. And guys, this is pretty simple. This is actually going to be probably the easiest week you guys will get out of this class. Give me grass. And that's both systems. So we want the grass on the ground and the flying grass. So make sure you give me both of those. If you want to add hair, go for it. I'm not going to make that a requirement. You don't have to do that, but now you pretty much know how. So if you want your character to have some hair, by all means do that. There
was one thing...
Please.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Would it be helpful if they had to submit a render?
I don't have a problem with that. Let's just...
Otherwise, rendering time is going to be...
Here, let's just do this. The submission for this week, and this is going to be so simple, guys. We don't even really need to see a file. Just send me a single frame render. Just one frame. I just need to see that the grass is there. So, find one of those frames where you've got your thrown grass up in the air, right about the swing. And I'll be able to see the stuff on the ground, and that tells me that you got everything done. And you know what? An elevator said Photoshop. Hey, it'd actually be hard to pull this off in Photoshop and make it look exactly the same. It'd be pretty easy to spot. And, I mean, if somebody really wanted to go through that kind of work, that'd be terrible. I mean, they're just cheating themselves, so I don't care. So yeah, just send me a render of your grass so I can see that you've got it. That will speed things up on our end because really I just want to see that you have grass, and we'll be able to tell at a glance with a render whether or not you understand what the settings are supposed to be doing. You were able to follow along okay. Now, because everything that you really need to do for this week has already been demonstrated right here in this class. This is going to be a very basic week for all of you. In fact, some of you are probably just about done with your homework right now. Use this as a way to catch up with anything else you're having problems with, meaning if you need to clean up your textures a bit, if you need to clean up your animation a bit, handle that now, because next week we're going to be taking a look at finalization and doing our rendering, and you want everything to be as clean as it can be for the render. So you've got some time to catch up. Anything you need to clean up on, now's the time. Are there any final questions? Somebody said, I always wanted to know what weight painting was for in Blender. Actually, you know what? I practically never use weight painting on hair. Well, I don't do that much hair effect, but I guess if you really get into hair, you'll use it a lot. Weight painting is also really good for doing skinning when you're attaching geometry to a skeleton or to an armature, and you'll be using it a lot for that. And if you have a question and you can't remember what it is, just feel free to shoot me a PM later. I have been pretty good about answering the PMs that I get, as I'm sure several of your fellow students will attest. And I guess with that, guys, I just want to thank you all for showing up and for taking part in today's lesson. We will get this video up as soon as we are able. It may not be this evening. It may actually be tomorrow, but I'm not too stressed about that really because, this was all pretty quick stuff. I think we've had a pretty good time here. I hope the notes were able to make things a little bit smoother for everybody. I will try to make a point to have these available whenever I can. Understand that, like in upcoming classes, like the modeling class, there won't be too much by way of notes once we get to modeling, because there's just there's not much to do. Now, when we're talking about tools and polygon theory and that sort of thing, you can make all kinds of notes for that. But the modeling process for me is very intuitive, and so writing out notes isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world. But that's okay. We'll come to that in the next session, which I hope to see all of you guys in. So thank you all very much, and I will catch you all in our next and final Blender 101 class. Good luck, and I'll see you next week.